right. Hi, everyone. We're at week 9 of the UX Speaker Series in HCDE. So we got one more week next. We'll have one more speaker next week. I actually won't be here. I will be traveling. We're having an HCD alumni event in the Bay Area. So if you have any friends in the Bay Area, you might want to get them come to the alumni event. So Tyler Fox was going to be here on my stead next week. So, but if you have any questions about the class, you might want to ask me today if you're registered for the class. But otherwise, it will be my last time seeing you since I won't be here next week. So thanks everybody for all your time and attention and your great questions for speakers. So I'll introduce today's speaker. So we have Trinh Vo Yetzer, who is a managing partner at UX'er Research International, where she plays a pivotal role in shaping the company's strategic direction, overseeing day-to-day operations, and fostering a culture of innovation and excellence. She has over 25 years of experience in user experience and product development, and she's been instrumental in driving the creation of intuitive, user-friendly, and innovative products that enhance the customer experiences. And we met over coffee just beforehand, and she told me she's going to tell me a little bit more about her career. So I'm going to leave some of those things for her to reveal about herself. And so Trinh is also great. She hosted a career trek a while ago, so she's become a good friend of HCDE. So welcome, Trinh.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me?
Hang on, let me. All right, you should begin now.
Since we have a small group, feel free to ask a lot of questions. Okay. I'll come and talk to you guys a bit. But thank you so much for having me here today. I obviously am here with common interest in UX, and so I love the HCD program. A lot of the employees that we've hired from UX'er Research International comes from this program, so thank you for doing great work and learning and being part of the UX program. So today I'm hoping that I can share with you guys, I get a lot of questions around what is it like being in big tech? And what is it like being in the agency? And to share some stories with you of some of the skill sets, some of the experience I think would be really valuable as you guys look at how to transition into a career, how to kind of what decision to make and what works for you guys. So yeah, and at any point, feel free to ask any question. So as you start your UX journey, I just want you guys to know that your career does not always have to be a linear path. Mine definitely was not linear at all. People are like, oh my gosh, you've been in the field for over 25 years, and they envision I've just been a researcher or manage a team of UX. Mine started off very non-traditional. So I started in UX in 1999, but 5 years prior to that, 1994, I graduated with a biology and psychology degree, and I was so convinced that I was going to be a physical therapist. My dream passion since I was in first grade. I am going to be a physical therapist. I didn't get in. Devastated, crushed, didn't know what I was going to do. I decided to take some time off to just figure out what's next, because I got into medical school, but I didn't get into physical therapy school. And so back then, physical therapy school was so hard, and I had straight A's and I had volunteer hours. I did all the things I thought for sure I was going to get in. Well, I didn't get in. And so I landed a executive admin job at Microsoft. And I'm sure my parents were like, this is not what we paid you to go to college for. But to be honest, being an executive admin was one of the best learning experience. I learned project management. I learned communication. I learned how to work with different levels of the organization. You have to be quick and you have to be detail-oriented. You're working, I would talk to Bill Gates probably once a week about scheduling, about something, Steve Ballmer. That was kind of the engagement I had at 24 years old. So that experience, I think, helped me become a better leader, to be honest, to see how people interact with each other. Just the project management, keeping here's the list, here's what I need to get done, here's how I need to do that. And so I started out doing that for a couple of years, and then I realized, I'm like, I really like this technology and being at Microsoft. And so I got promoted to be business ops manager for a really big division, Windows Server division. And there I learned space planning, budget planning, business operations. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I became very curious. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's this group of people that are called usability engineer. I don't know if you've heard that title back then. That's what everybody was called, was usability engineer. And I went over and said, what do you guys do? Like, oh, we talk to users and UX. UX wasn't back then. It wasn't a thing. It was called usability. And so I was very curious, and I wanted to find out, like, I think I could do this. This has my background in psychology, and they're doing amazing research. So I got super excited, and I asked the manager, and some of you may know or have heard of Tammy Snow. She is the head of Workday. So she was my first UX manager, and she was like, I asked, can I do a side project? Can I learn UX? She's like, sure. The first project she gave me was recruiting participant, IT, enterprise level IT administrator. And back then there wasn't a recruiting team that used to, hey, here's the screener, go and help find these participants. I'm like, okay, sure. Pretty much I had to call. Back then we had to call, I called Boeing. Can I talk to your IT department? And I'm sure they're like, okay, sure. I did find 20 participants for this study, but you just got to do what you have to do. And so I just made calls to all these big enterprise companies to get participants. And then I just kept doing projects, and finally they hired me on to do, they're like, you don't have a master's degree yet, so we'll call you a usability coordinator. I'm like, okay. And then they finally paid for my master's degree back when it was at Microsoft. But I just want you guys to know that your career doesn't always have to look a certain way. Sometimes I think as a student, graduate student, you're just in your mind envisioning I was going to be a physical therapist, and I didn't. And I'm so glad I didn't, because I love, still to this day, this is the career I would pick. And within that career, there's so many opportunity, being big tech. And then we'll talk a little bit about, what does working in big tech look like? Because it looks very different than working for an agency or a smaller company. So there's just a lot of opportunities out there. And we were just talking, Julie and Melissa and I were talking about, they're still hiring, but you have to be a little bit flexible. I think a lot of grad student comes into the workforce and saying, I want to work for the big 5 tech company. And right now it's hard. You can see they're not hiring as much. But I've talked to a lot of the smaller company, mid-sized company, and they're always looking for good UX, professional UX field designer, researchers. So, if you're good, you'll find a job. We hire. I think every month we've hired a couple employees every month, and so there is definitely a big need and demand to this field. So I'm really happy you guys are in this field, because it's a great field, and I've done it for 25 years, and I still have no regrets, and I'm still learning. I think that's the fun thing about our field. There's always something to learn, new technology, new domain. In 3 years ago, you've never heard anything about AI, and now AI is everything. And so it's a really wonderful field to be in, because you're always having to learn and having to figure out, like, oh, what does this technology do, and how do I get immersed into that and get deeper in that area. So yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit about my background, and now kind of transition into, well, what does it look like being in a big tech company? Because people ask, what's the difference? It's a pretty big difference. For me, it was drastically different, but both are great. Both have the positive and both have differences. And knowing that when you apply is really important, because coming in there and being generic is not going to differentiate you. And so really, even if you're like, well, I'm going to apply for both, cater your mindset and your questions and your approach differently than if you were I just want a job, because they can see, okay, are you sure you want to be in big tech, or are you sure you can work in an agency? So I'll give you some guidance and just share some stories about what some of the experience is like, and feel free to ask questions as well. Okay, so as far as big tech, I think in any company you have to show passion. I think that's the biggest thing, is making sure that you're passionate about the field you're in. Know about the product. I see too many people come into the industry. We ask them, do you know what we do? Do you know what product you're applying for? They don't. And so today, it's amazing how much information is out there. I think, from an agency, I probably see 5 different clients with 5 different product a week. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, I don't want to, go to a meeting, act like I have no clue what's going on. So it's amazing. There's, AI tells you, like, this is what this product does. This is what they're known for. YouTube, I want to see, a certain dashboard. Like, oh, how do they do this fintech? How does their dashboard look? It's YouTube shows you exactly. People are reviewing it. Reddit. I mean, there's so much information out there that you should spend at least, 30, 40, like an hour prepping for that product. And I see so many people not prepping for that, what they're interviewing for, and it's out there. I mean, back in the days, there wasn't. You're just interviewing. But these days, employers are expecting you to talk about the product, understand the product. So it is out there. So do your homework. Be passionate about that. I think the big thing around with the big tech, the big difference I see is that you are very specialized. You're coming in there working for a very particular company, a particular product. Your role is very specialized to your, I think a lot of big tech, if you're applying for Microsoft or Google, you don't want to say, well, I kind of want to do both design and research. That's probably not going to work because they want you to say, I am a researcher, I am an interaction designer. So be very specialized if you're planning to apply for the big tech company. If you want to have the hybrid method and do both. You're like, well, I really like research and I want to do some design. The mid-sized company and smaller company are much more open to having that because they don't have the resource or the fundings to hire a lot of people. But if you are planning to apply for big tech, be specialized. Be really good at what you're doing. Interviewing, talk about your passion for research, interaction design, whatever that role is. Know the product. They're expecting you to talk about that domain. If you are applying for cloud, who are the cloud competitors? Go out there and look at saying, what does the AI space look like? What does the cloud space look like? If you're applying for fintech, who are the big players? If they pick 3 big players, go and say, what's the difference? What are they known for? I think those are things that when I see candidate, they're amazing, that have done their homework, really understand, the product, the domain, and curious about the space. And so I think that is one of the things that's super, super important in big tech. And I think another thing that is really important is just knowing how to work with people. Working with being an agency is limited amount of interaction with usually your client. With the big tech, and I'll move to that. With the tech, it is so essential to know how to work with your stakeholders. I think that is one of the key differentiator, of working in big tech. Because a lot of time, I think, when you're new in your career, you get very focused on doing the research and just thinking about the research, but you don't look at the bigger picture, like who are all. It's like being on a basketball team or any team that you play on. Who are the other players that I need to engage with? And because they have different priorities, you should understand the business direction. What are some of the limitations? I think knowing your stakeholders in big tech, it's so important. And I do talk to a lot of the executives of why, when they find great UX profession, why is that? And a lot of the executive, and these are not UX profession, more like VP of product, they have said to me is, I've had a chance to work, and I moved pretty quickly at Microsoft, and they said, you just know how to work with people. And you know how to work with developers, you know how to work with testers. I remember when I was at Microsoft, I would spend hours talking with my head developer, and we would go at it. I'm like, we need to do this for our users. This is the right thing to do. And he's like, I don't have the time and the resource. If I do this, I have to not do these 6 features. And a lot of time we will negotiate and come to terms like, okay, that works for me, and that works for you. And but know how to work together and understand who your key stakeholders. So you spend a lot of time, especially in big tech, because it's a bigger organization, cross-team, cross-discipline. So super important to invest and spend time knowing your audience, and your audience is your stakeholders. And the UX professionals who struggle they tend to say, well, I did great design, I did great research, but nobody knew or cared, or you didn't talk to anybody. So early on, make sure you network. Early on, say, I want to meet my developer, I want to meet my researcher designer, I want to meet my product manager. Take the time to really get to know them, get to know what is important for them and how they prioritize their work. Understand the business. It's amazing. To this day, I have so many researchers, when I ask them, do you know what the business goals are? No clue. And I just it's so important to understand where the business is headed, because you are part of the business. And in order to be successful, every year there is, business goals, business priorities. And if you hear that, our business priority is to know AI and learn about AI, get familiar with AI, be able to talk about that, that is going to be so important for your just ability to get deep and your value at the company. So I think for me, what I found working in tech is the employees that I saw do really well and get promoted really quick is they understand how to work with the whole relationship of all of these profile. And research is not in silo. We're building together, and it's a team sport. And just, you have to get everybody on board. And once you get people on board, they're going to value what you do. They're going to value your design. They're going to value your research, and they're going to bring you to the table. I get a lot of people say, well, I don't feel like I get, asked to be at the table. You got to earn it. You're not going to be asked to the table and you have no value to add. So earn it. Earn that respect by sharing your UX skills, learning about what they do and what's important to them. And so when I start doing that early, I think that's really, really helpful. So take the time to meet your key stakeholders. If you were to work in any company, that's really important to do. Any questions so far before I? Okay. So I worked in big tech for 17 years, loved every minute of it. And I don't know if I would have been courageous enough to leave, but I think I had my two partners just asked me 3 times, and my husband at that time said, they're not going to ask you again to start this company. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, go big or go home kind of a thing. But I was like, I kind of like, I just made it to director, and back then director was really high at Microsoft, and so I took the risk. And honestly, it was some of the best experience. Still, it's super amazing experience. Was it hard? Yes, because the skill set is a little bit different. I think a lot of it had to be scrappy. You had to learn how to run a business. And so it was, it feels very different in being in agency. A lot of it is being an agency. You are on a tight timeline. You have a project, a client expects quality and timely, and you get a project, you have a deadline, you get it done, you do your presentation, you move on, and you get another product, where if you work in big tech, you're with that product for a long time. Sometimes, like when I was on Windows Server, product used to ship 5 years. And so now it's probably every 6 months or a year. But you are stuck with that product and with your team, and you get to see it from beginning to end in the big tech. And with agency, you have to be really, really comfortable with ambiguity, because sometimes when you're working with clients, they don't know what they want either. And so they say they want something. I'm like, I don't think that's the right approach. Let's think about this differently. Something doesn't work, schedule doesn't work, but they still want everything on that time. And so if you're more comfortable with the ambiguity, it allows you to have more creativity. I find that I get a lot more creativity. And I'll show you this map. So this is an interesting, for me, I was looking back when I was in tech. All the things that are highlighted are the typical things that I did in my 17 years. And so it's in a lot of ways, when you work on a product team, some of the methodology, some of the approach are very scoped, very small, because some companies say, we only do usability engineer. Like when I was in Windows Server, I only did usability testing and benchmarking. And then once I got more advanced, I did more focus group and persona work. And then at URI, my first 2 years at URI, I did every single one of those things. And that's recruiting. How do you build the facility? And obviously, this is more from an entrepreneur set, but I did every methodology because every client have their way of doing it. No, we love doing card sort. We love doing unmoderated study. Oh, we want to do persona. We want to do in-depth study. I did all of that within 3 years at an agency, because we have every year is over 200 projects that we do at User Research International. So you will get not only different method, you also get different domain. Everything from cloud to accessibility to travel, where when you work in a particular company, it's very targeted. It's very like you're working on a cloud product. You're working on a financial product. So it's very it allows you to go deeper in big tech in what you do. But in agency, you are expected to just move more through the method, so it's a lot broader scopes of learning, and you have to feel comfortable doing that, being able to just switch from, okay, this month I'm going to be running a benchmark. Next month I'm going to be doing focus group. Then I'm going to be traveling doing international studies. So you get a broad variety of different method and skills more in an agency. So, any question around any of those methods? Sure.
Out of those 4 columns that you have, research, recruiting, facilities, and staffing, which one takes up most of your business?
Definitely research. Research is our bread and butter. That is, because a lot of it is client. We are known for that, and part of the other service recruiting facility, it's really around the need to get our work done faster. And when we started User Research International, we just did research and then we outsourced recruiting. And then when I joined, I'm like, it's taking us too long to get vendor to help us, so let's bring it in-house. So then we built our own recruiting team to move it faster, get faster and more accountable to get things done. And then our facility, we have a whole lab team that is just part of, critical to what we do. And then staffing is actually really new to us, and I think part of that was almost a survival mode during the, crazy tech COVID. We felt that, okay, what we know is when people are not spending, vendor spending, they will outsource contractors. And so we said, let's start this team, because if they're not spending on research, they're going to hire a contractor. And so there's the scrappiness and seeing what's the business needs and business demand. And so staffing has been, it's one of the biggest pillar, and we've only started a year and a half. And we have 30 staffing assignment for people in, in this area. So yeah, you had a question too.
I was curious, what do you think would be more forgiving if you consider yourself like a middling talent, for example? Like if you are in a specialized role, eventually you have more time to onboard and specialize, and if you didn't already have the best education, you can probably figure it out. But if you are being asked to do this 1 month and then another month, you don't really have that much onboarding time to ramp up before you need to get in front of the client. Would you say that being in an agency is somewhat less forgiving in that way? Or?
I think it almost depends on your personality type. I think there's certain expectation, or are you good at presenting? Are you comfortable with client? The method, I always say, it's really easy to teach method. It's very prescriptive. Like, here's how you do usability study. Here's how you do. Where I think it's harder if you are not comfortable working with clients, dealing with schedule, timeline, presenting. Because I say, even if you do the best research, paper and report, and then you present to a client, you are terrible at presenting, there goes your whole research project. So I think, I know for us, we train a lot. We have a full-time dedicated trainer, because there are certain skills that are so important for us. We have a lot of great, we call it plan of record with our client. Here's a kickoff meeting, and here's, most researchers know how to moderate, so we don't worry about that as much. But if they're nervous, we will help them and we'll get them practice. Where we spend a lot of time is the presentation, the domain space too. We may start a lot of new people in the consumer space. And then once they get comfortable in consumer, we move them to the information worker, business to business. And then, and some are really just natural in the like technical space. And then we will move them to the technical space. And it's interesting because we can kind of tell by the, individual, because some technical product, they tend to be very limited in method. We just want to know competitive, most, like all the cloud, we have all the cloud clients, they work with URI, and they just really want to do competitive benchmarking. But then on the consumer side, the research is really broad. I mean, you're doing a lot of different method and different approach, and so the domain is less, you can pick it up a lot easier in the consumer space than the competitive. But there's smaller company will help guide you and train you, because especially an agency, we're not going to put you in front of somebody if you're not ready, because that will, one bad experience, sorry, we never want to work with you again. So there's a lot of training and development and guiding, and I mean, we have a dedicated full-time professor. He taught at UC San Diego, and so he is full-time with us, making sure that people are comfortable and confident, from professionalism to, we get a lot of practice before we just throw you out there. But with the tech industry, you're kind of part of the team, and so you can fumble a little bit, and that's okay. You don't have to write beautiful report, because all the report we have, it has to be standalone. A lot of my report gets moved up to executive, and they're reading it, and they need to understand it without me presenting. And so the detail has to be there in the presentation, where if you're in-house, I just walk to the developers, say, hey, I need you to do these 3 things, and here's why, here's what this report is. Can you do it? So it's less writing and communication. So great question. So. Yes. So this is where scrappiness and an agency is really important. So during COVID, we were like, oh my goodness, we are going to lose half of our business, because we did a lot of hardware testing, AR, VR, gaming. And so we said, what do we need to do to have labs? We want participant to be safe. We want our researcher to be safe. We want our technical setup person to be safe. So we bought, and I have one of my brilliant partner. He's just like the innovator, the genius guy. He's like, why don't we buy these like fancy? They look like, like trailer. I don't know, fancy trailer, and they're just they're glass, and they have these, it's like an office. Imagine like an office. And container with glass. And so we're like, okay. And then we said, okay, how do we make this safe, for that there's no contact? We don't want, so we call it NSF, which is one of the health safety guideline for hospital. And they said, yep, you have to take you have to have certified trainer come in, teach you how to do UV filtering, zap all the space, and then wipe down after they zap with this light. It's like medical grade, and then IT people come in, wipe it down, and participant. We have to like figure out how to open the door, and so there's no contact. So they talk to at the door. We had this little screen. It's like a little front the ring. We have a screen. Hi, how are you? Welcome, Melissa, to URI. You're in pod 4, and we open the door. So clean. So we did over 2,000 studies in the pods, because the companies that had to still do research on device, watch, phone, anything that was hardware. They still have to do research, but I think the only complaint we had was one participant. It's like, it's really clean. It feels like a medical clinic. I'm like, okay, that's good. That's better than anything. So that is our contactless pod that we built. Now we just use it as labs, but it had all the, we had to get it certified, and so that was a really fun project, and we started out with, I think, 4, and now we have 6 of them, because we were going to build out our labs. We have 10 labs at UX'er Research International, and we needed more. And back then, building permits was not allowed. Everything was closed. The city, I don't remember if the city, permit people were closed. So this was the lab, was the contacts lab was what we did to be innovative and still do research without getting other people sick. And we ran over 2,000 sessions in the labs. So it's really fun to see. Okay, so I talked a little bit about what's the difference about working in agency versus tech company. And again, with agency, it's being able to balance multiple domains, products. We talked about that. There's always uncertainty. I find that it's much more uncertainty working with, sometimes you get amazing clients, and sometimes you get more finicky clients. So, you just have to deal with the ambiguity. So if you like something very scheduled, steady, agency is probably not a good fit. But if you like that, like, hey, I need to do something different all the time and see something different, that might be a better fit for you. Where working in a product team, you work on one product for probably from beginning to end. You get to see it through the whole end of the product life cycle. Where you have to be comfortable with agency. You do a project. Here you go, client. Okay, thank you. Move on to the next one really quickly. Usually you do about 10 projects, different projects a year. In agency, that's what we like. Our researcher, they do about 0.9 project a month. So some longer, but that's where when you work in a tech, it might be the same method over and over, or the same product over and over. So yeah, that is kind of the big thing. And then the big thing too, as we mentioned, stakeholders and product teams, that is something you will have to work a lot more with big tech, and you have to be really comfortable working with developers and being able to talk their language, being able to talk testers' language, understanding the business, and versus an agency it's much more around schedule, timeline, get this product shipped, and in the end, it is expected that you are an expert. You cannot go in there and just be a reporter. I think that's one of the things I want to really, especially for people who want to be a researcher, reporting is not being an expert. You have to understand the data. You have to understand insights. You have to understand, and I'll share a couple stories with you here. I have a couple stories I wanted to share. Right before COVID, I did this huge international travel. Was in Japan, but I think it was like 5 countries we traveled to, and the president of this very big online travel company attended every single my session. I'm like, oh my goodness. And so, the report, I kind of knew all the insights, and I was in Japan when he was in Japan, and he said, you need to help me make a $20 million decision now. And he said, should we add this feature or not? And you have to have this confidence. You have to not only just say the data, but you have to say how this insight is going to have impact on your product and help you make more money and build a better experience. That was the big thing, is building this better experience, because this travel company just was very focused in the U.S. and did not consider other culture. And if you guys, I love UW, there's multicultural. I know when I go to Vietnam or Asia, everything on a website needs to be filled. Things are popping out at you, special, and here's free food, and and if it's not filled in Asia, it feels scammy. It's uncomfortable for people. It's like, I don't think they're finished with that product. Where here we're like, oh, we need some white space, we need some, cleanness, and so really understanding cultural difference is really important. And I think a lot of companies try to templatize a lot of their product to look exactly the same, but they don't realize it doesn't work for different culture, and you have to be really thoughtful. And he was like, this is going to cost me $20 million. Should I do it? I was like, absolutely. And here's why. And, having this, but you have to, luckily I had some experience. I wasn't nervous about it, but it was but I was like, oh, I better make the right decision, because he's probably not going to ever use me if but the data was there. We heard what user want. And so that's the great thing about UX. All the data is there for us to really drive and make great decision for our users. So, that was, some of the fun stuff I get to do at agency, a lot of traveling and doing different things. And then I know this is going to ask about accessibility. Accessibility got really popular, probably, I don't know, popular, but more important, like about 15 years ago. I would say probably 13 years ago, it became really important. And I remember when I just had this passion for accessibility. I'm on the disability board of Washington. I'm the president of that board because I just to be innovative, let's build product that everyone could use. And one of the product we worked on was, wheelchair. How when you are traveling, this is a different travel company, and when we travel, can people in wheelchairs see the kiosk? Can they, get the baggage tag? Can they check in? And most of the time it isn't. It's like the enter button or turn off button is way up in the upper right. And when you're sitting down on a wheelchair, it's not accessible. And so our client at the time said, we need 20 participants. And so we're like, okay, our database had a lot of participants, but not people with accessibility or mobility need. And so for us was a really fun, creative. It was like, okay, where can we find people in wheelchair? And so we were able to call, I called Special Olympics because they have sporting events, and they're like, oh yeah, Seattle is really known for the disability athletes. And have you heard of the Seattle Slam? Have you heard of beep ball? And I'm like, okay. So I happened to call the Seattle Slam. So it's a wheelchair rugby team. They are so in shape. If you ever go, and my son volunteered and helped them out score, and they are so competitive. They're amazing. So I'm like, okay, here's this coach name. I'm going to call him. And we were able to recruit the whole team to run the study for us because they all were in wheelchair. And then they said, we know other teams too. So they helped us do that. And so I think with agency, you have to be a little bit more scrappy because every month you get something different that you've never seen or heard or a new product. And you're like, okay, how do I get new participants that meet this profile? And so that's the really fun thing, that I get to do. And just recently, not very long ago, I had a chance to also work on some environmental accessibility. Like neurodiversity is a really big thing right now of like, okay, when you are working in open space, is it too loud? Does it, do you get anxious, or the noise and the accessibility of coming into the work environment? So our whole team, we had three researchers go to a big coffee company and really assess what are the things that are not accessible, and some of the things were it's really loud. They have open space, so for people who have neurodiversity, it's very hard to process information, and so you need some quiet room, you need some conference room where people can do that. So some of the learnings are that, and some of it was like, okay, they're doing more Teams meeting, and so the instruction was just way too much. There's no chunking of content. You see this like, oh my gosh, I have to set up a meeting, and it's like 5 pages. And so that could be really overwhelming. So it was really fun to be able to go into a company and learn the accessibility of the environment and how can you make it better, and just making sure the environment is productive and safe for people. So that was a really fun project that we recently did not too long ago. So agency, you get to see a very broad range of different product and domain, and so that's the thing that I enjoyed a lot of being at User Research International. Any questions? Yeah?
How did you find the users for that accessibility study?
Yeah, so for the kiosk, again, I remember first when we realized accessibility was becoming really popular, and we realized we really need to build our database of accessibility participant. And we made some mistakes. Some learning, it was really, I called the Federation for the Blind. Washington has a Federation for the Blind. I called the Braille Library. There's a Braille Library in downtown Seattle. And I called all Special Olympics. So the amazing thing about the accessibility world, it is so well connected. There are disability in Washington. That's how I became the president, because I'm like, oh, can you help me? And they're like, yeah. You know, we were, the Lighthouse for the Blind they built, I mean, if you've never had a chance to visit Lighthouse for the Blind, it's amazing. Majority of the workers are blind, and they do a lot of the manufacture for like the airline industry, and the way they do it's so amazing, and how meticulous it is. So we learned, how to just build that database and community, and the community, to be honest, they helped us too. And I know some of my lesson I learned, I'm like, oh, they're blind. Okay, so we need information on Braille. So we went to the Braille library. Can you print out all the instruction, how to, the task list, all these things. And a lot of our participants comes like, we have technology. Most of us, unless we're born blind, we don't even read Braille. Like Braille is kind of outdated. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so there's just a lot of things that we've learned along the way. But the great thing about that audience, don't be afraid. If you're having a new audience, like I remember I was so nervous. We ran our first study. I'm like, oh, how do I guide somebody? I was really nervous, like, do I grab them? And so I said, let's get some training. So we hired these two amazing women at the Washington Federation for the Blind. And I said, can you come and teach our team, our company, how to work with, participants who are blind? And she's like, absolutely. And they were blind, both of them. And they were just so honest with us, like, we want to be like all of you. And so don't grab, just ask, just ask like how, and then just, open the door. The door is opening right, and just think like you're 2 steps ahead of us. And never grab someone, never assume they need help, ask. And so they taught us all these proper protocol, how to guide, how to help, and guide dog, what does that mean? And so that was so helpful. It made me feel very comfortable. And it's still, to this day, people are still very awful for people with disability. I remember every time we really try to make it an easy experience for our accessibility participant. And I don't know, every single study, there's always one Uber guy or one won't pick them up. And I'm like, we see you. And they won't pick them up either because they have a guide dog, which is, legally they have to, or just like, no, I don't want to have to deal with someone who's blind. And of course we call and, just say, hey, this is not okay. This is not right. And so they're like, okay, we'll talk to them. But it's just, for us, it's really important to give people great experience. So we make sure they get Uber picked up and dropped off, and we help them through the process. So you will encounter different participant, different, and just embrace it, learn it. And I'm so glad I did, because I wouldn't probably be on the disability in board if it wasn't just to see like, wow, there's a different way of doing it. And what you do, the work that you guys do is so impactful. It's not just it's literally changed people's lives. I mean, I've seen a screen reader. I mean, for them to have that experience of, using technology in a way that's easy and is accessible for them. So the work that you guys do are really amazing. And so my specialty now has been around more accessibility, because that's a area that I'm super passionate about. But find your passion, and get deep in it and learn from it. There are people out there, they will help you, they will guide you, they want you to learn. So if you have an area of interest, dive deep into that area. They will help teach you. As we get kind of close to, I think, our time here soon, I really want to make sure this graphic is from medium.com that I used. And one of the things I really want to hear a lot for people that are starting their career and want to grow, career, is a progression. And I do see a lot of new young profession who really just want to skip the process. I want to be a director in a year. That is probably not realistic. And if you happen to get that, you're probably going to get fired, because you haven't mastered the foundation. And so, especially in our field, your foundation has to be solid. So if you're working in big tech and your goal is to run usability study or do some method or whatever that is, be the best at that. Don't rush the process, because it's gonna happen. The people I see struggle, tend to rush the process. And, I see a lot of, my husband's an executive, and so I get exposed to a lot of the executives in this area, and they said, for UX, the people we see that's really valuable, that have a seat at the table is really they know their stuff. They're deep into the business, they're deep into their the method. They can talk about the method, they can talk why they're doing that, they understand how to do it. But a lot of time, it's all of us. We get so excited. We want to jump to the next level. We want to do the next thing. And so when you have the opportunity to just build that foundation, and sometimes you may just say, "Gosh, this seems boring. I've been doing this for a long time." Find ways to learn. Do it differently. Train somebody. Talk to your developer about what you did. The more that you build your foundation, your progression will happen really, really fast. I see the people where you might get a short-term gain and said, "Oh, I'm gonna apply for that level, and I'm gonna get it," but you may not be ready for it. A lot of the executives say, "Yeah, we laid off a lot of UX people because they were more tactical to us. They didn't grow into being strategic. They didn't grow into knowing their space," and so take the time to really understand and build that foundation, because if you don't, it's going to catch up. Because I always tell my researcher, my designer, I said, "Hey, if I put you with a senior researcher and I just pick somebody they know that's been doing it, are you going to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with them? Are you going to be able to play with them?" It's like, I love sports because I've played sports. It's like, okay, if you play sports for 10 years in basketball, and then you come out and play basketball for 2 years, you're probably not going to be as good as someone that's played 10 years or have 10 years of experience. So don't rush the process. There's every moment you will have an opportunity to learn. Take on those challenges. Take on some of the hard challenges. I mean, I remember my first project at Microsoft. I had to work. Have you guys heard of back office? It is literally how to get the internet outside world. Back then, there was the internet just came out, and nobody wanted to do it. I was everybody, give it to Trinh. She's the new one. It's the worst, it's so hard. And I remember my manager and I have a session at 8 a.m. Could not get it to work. And I'm underneath the lab trying to plug everything in. I'm like, this is not working. We don't have the internet. And at 1 a.m., this is 1 a.m. I've been working on it all day, couldn't figure it out. She's like, "I don't know. You just have to call Charlie. He's our developer." I'm like, "Charlie, 1 a.m., this is not working. And we have a session at 8 a.m. He's like, "Okay, I'll be there in a minute." We're working on it, and finally at 4 a.m., it worked. And he's like, "Do you want to go to IHOP since you have a session at 8? I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not going home. I'll just go and eat and come back and be ready for my session." But that was honestly what we laughed. He's still around, and he is retired, but we laughed so much because he's like, "Oh my gosh, we had no clue what we're doing, but we were helping each other. Somehow it worked." Those are the moments that you remember, and people respect you. He became head developer at Microsoft, and he said, "You were under the table, and I was trying to make something work, and is it working?" Back then we're like, "This is just terrible. This is the hardest product." They put some new researcher on, but take the time to learn that and embrace that, because I think too often we try to rush the process. We try to skip a process, and there is someone that's going to get really deep and they want to learn it. So make sure you take time to do that, and eventually you will get to be more strategic. You will, and it builds on top of each other, and so you will have not only the organizational skills but the process skill, and they will come together. So don't rush the process. If you can learn, take your time to grow in those areas. So as you build your career, start with a strong foundation. I think we will all have our different path. This is something I like to just kind of share. It doesn't have to be linear. My background is, as I mentioned, it does not have to be linear at all. And every challenge, every detour, every ups and downs, you will have an opportunity to learn. So take this moment to learn. Whether you choose big tech or agency, I think the biggest thing is be adaptable. I think being able to be adaptable is really important. And early on, you may not know your role. You may not say, "Gosh, do I want to be a designer? Oh, do I want to be a researcher?" But know kind of, if you want to do big tech, then know that, hey, you probably have to choose. If you want to do more hybrid, you're probably going to have to go to a smaller mid-sized company. And then just be aware of the type of company. I definitely recommend early in your career, don't go to a company where I call it department of one, meaning you're the researcher, you're the designer, and no one else is there to help guide you, mentor you, support you. It's harder, you can do that, but it's, you don't want to be stuck and I'm like, I don't know how to do this and no one's there to help you. You can be successful if you get mentor outside of it, but I recommend find a place that has development to continue to help build your foundation, and then you can always move. And I see people move all the time, every couple of years, but get enough experience, like stay somewhere at least a year, get that experience, get that depth of knowledge, because when you have your next job, you can talk about it. You can, people are being really hard on, I find that more interviewers are being harder on skill set and knowledge. And so the more the experience that you have, the better you can interview and talk about those situation. And then,